The polished linoleum floors of Oakcrest High gleamed under the sterile fluorescent lights, a silent testament to the nightly labor of a man most students never truly saw. His name was Elijah, and he moved through the empty hallways not as a person, but as a ghost, a figure defined by a mop bucket and a ring of keys, his presence as expected and unnoticed as the rising sun. But on this day, the universe had decided to shift on its axis. It began with a piece of chalk. A single, white, dusty cylinder that would become the instrument of a humiliation so profound, it would ripple through the very foundations of the school. It was third period, and Mr. Thorne's advanced calculus class was a languid pool of senior-year arrogance and boredom, and Mr. Thorne, a man whose ego was only outmatched by his condescension, needed a new punchline. His eyes, cold and calculating behind wire-rimmed glasses, scanned the room before landing on the figure outside the door's small window. Elijah was pushing his wide dust mop in a slow, rhythmic dance, his head down, his world contained within the 3-foot path of his labor. A cruel, thin smile spread across Thorne's face. He gestured for the class to be quiet, a conspiratorial finger to his lips. "Watch this," he whispered, the words dripping with malicious promise. He rapped on the glass, summoning the janitor inside. Elijah entered, a quiet intrusion into a world of formulas and futures he was never meant to be a part of. The students snickered, sensing the familiar setup of a joke where they were the audience, and the janitor was the punchline. Thorne picked up the chalk and gestured to the complex problem covering the entire blackboard, a monstrous equation of integrals and derivatives that had stumped the class's valedictorian just minutes before. "Elijah," Thorne said, his voice a syrupy mockery of politeness. "We're having a bit of trouble here. Think you could lend us a hand and solve this for us?" The room erupted in laughter. It was a cruel, dismissive sound, meant to shrink a man into a caricature. They expected a mumbled apology, a retreat, a shuffling back into invisibility. They expected the joke to land, as it always had, reinforcing the natural order of things. They did not expect Elijah to stop. They did not expect him to look at the board, his dark, weary eyes tracing the labyrinth of symbols and numbers. They did not expect the silence that followed, a silence so deep and profound it began to swallow their laughter whole. And they certainly did not expect him to reach out, his work-roughened hand closing slowly around the piece of chalk. The air crackled. The joke was over. Something else was beginning. Something that would shatter every assumption, every prejudice, every carefully constructed hierarchy in this room. What happened next wasn't just a solution. It was a reckoning. To understand the seismic shift of that moment, you have to understand the man. Elijah Jones was not born with a mop in his hand. He was born with a curiosity that burned like a star, in a small, clapboard house on the wrong side of a town that had already decided his limits. His mother, a woman whose hands were worn thin from cleaning other people's homes, would come home each night exhausted, but with a library book tucked under her arm. "The world is bigger than this, Eli," she'd whisper, her voice raspy with fatigue and hope. "Your mind is the key. No one can lock that away," and oh, how his mind soared. Numbers were his first language, a beautiful, pure logic where everything had an answer, a balance, a truth that the messy, prejudiced world outside lacked. While other kids played ball, Elijah would sit on the porch steps, filling stolen scraps of paper with equations, solving for X in a life that seemed determined to keep him a variable, unknown and unsolved forward. He was a natural phenom, a prodigy without a platform. His high school math teacher, a weary but kind man named Mr. Gable, saw the spark. He fought to get Elijah into advanced classes, only to be met with administrative shrugs and coded language. He'd be more comfortable with his peers, they'd say. We have to be realistic about his opportunities after graduation. The system, polite and implacable, gently but firmly closed every door. Then his mother got sick. The cleaning job stopped. The medical bills started. The dream of college, a fragile thing he'd nurtured in secret, evaporated like morning mist. Responsibility was a weight that demanded strong shoulders, not a dreaming mind. He took the first job he could get, custodial work at the very high school where his academic journey had ended. For 20 years, Elijah moved through the halls of Oakcrest High. He wiped the same graffiti from the same lockers, mopped the same spilled soda from the same cafeteria tiles, and emptied the same trash bins filled with the discarded drafts of essays and failed tests. He watched generations of students pass through, their lives full of possibilities that had been denied to him. He never spoke of his past. His silence was mistaken for simplicity. His humility was mistaken for a lack of intellect. He became a fixture, part of the school's architecture. The students, in their self-absorbed universes, barely registered him. The teachers, even the well-meaning ones, saw a reliable employee, a quiet man who did his job well. They didn't see the man who, on his lunch break, would sometimes sit in the empty library and pore over a discarded advanced physics textbook, his calloused finger tracing the elegant proofs, his mind alive and dancing in a world of abstract beauty they could never imagine. Mr. Thorne, however, saw something else entirely. He saw a prop. A convenient target for his petty demonstrations of superiority. Thorne was the darling of Oakcrest, coach of the academic decathlon, holder of a Teacher of the Year award, a man who believed his Ivy League education made him inherently superior to everyone, especially the non-teaching staff. His jokes at the expense of the lunch ladies, the administrative assistants, and especially Elijah, were a regular feature of his personality. They were never overtly malicious, always wrapped in a thin veneer of humor, but their purpose was clear: to reinforce his place at the top of the food chain. The stage was set. A brilliant man forced into invisibility. A small man desperate to feel seen. And a complex calculus problem waiting on a blackboard, like a dormant volcano, ready to erupt. The laughter in Mr. Thorne's classroom was a physical force, a wave of condescension meant to push Elijah back out the door. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the cruelty, but peer pressure was a powerful glue, sealing their mouths shut. They looked down at their notebooks, unable to meet the janitor's eyes. Mr. Thorne's smile widened, expecting his quarry to flee. This was the punchline. This was the moment of victory, but Elijah did not flee. He stood perfectly still, his shoulders squared not in defiance, but in a sudden, profound focus. The laughter faded, dying an awkward death in the thick silence that he created simply by not participating. All eyes were on him. His gaze was locked on the blackboard, not with confusion, but with a deep, almost unsettling concentration. It was the look of a master safecracker hearing the tumblers click into place slowly, deliberately. He walked toward the board. The only sound was the soft scuff of his worn work boots on the tile. The students held their breath. Thorne's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. This wasn't following the script. Elijah reached the board. He studied the problem for a long, agonizing moment. The equation was a beast, a triple integral involving trigonometric substitution, a problem designed to challenge the best minds in the school. Then, he did the unthinkable. He reached out and took the chalk from Mr. Thorne's limp hand. The air left the room. You could hear the hum of the lights, the distant slam of a locker down the hall. This was no longer a joke. This was a violation of the natural order. A janitor. A black janitor. Holding a piece of chalk meant for a gifted calculus teacher. Mr. Thorne found his voice, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips. All right, Elijah, very funny. That's enough. We all got a laugh. You can get back to your mopping. Elijah didn't seem to hear him. He was in another world. A world of logic and grace. He raised his hand, the chalk poised like a conductor's baton. And then, he began to write. The first symbol he put on the board wasn't a number. It was a beautifully drawn integral sign. It was confident, elegant. The laughter was gone now, completely. It was replaced by a stunned, bewildered silence, asterisk scritch. Scritch, asterisk. The sound of the chalk was deafening. He moved with a rhythm that was both methodical and inspired. He didn't pause. He didn't hesitate. Where the class's top student had stumbled, Elijah flowed. He executed a substitution so clever it drew a soft, involuntary gasp from a girl in the front row. He simplified terms, canceled variables, his hand moving in a smooth, uninterrupted ballet of pure mathematics. Mr. Thorne's face underwent a terrifying transformation. Confusion curdled into disbelief. Disbelief melted into dawning horror. His joke, his brilliant little joke, was backfiring in a way he could never have conceived. He stared at the board, his own mind, a supposed master of this subject, struggling to keep up with the effortless genius unfolding before him. His mouth hung slightly open. His face began to flush a deep, blotchy red. The students were mesmerized. Phones were secretly pulled out, recording the impossible scene. Whispers began to circulate, not of mockery, but of awe. He's actually doing it. Look at that. I've never seen that method before. Is this real? Elijah worked in a bubble of intense quiet, completely unaware of the revolution he was sparking in the room. He was no longer Elijah the janitor. He was a mind unleashed, solving, creating, proving. With a final, graceful flourish, he solved the indefinite integral and began evaluating the definite limits. The numbers fell into place. He circled the final answer. IT was correct. More than correct. It was elegantly, undeniably, brilliantly correct. He lowered his hand. A cloud of chalk dust drifted from his fingertips. He turned slowly and faced the room. His expression was not one of triumph or smugness. It was peaceful. Resolved. For the first time in 20 years, the internal world of his mind and the external world of his reality had been in perfect, harmonious alignment. If only for 2 minutes, he gently placed the chalk back on the tray. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, not to the stunned students, not to the apoplectic teacher, but to the solution on the board. A quiet acknowledgement of a truth well stated, and then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the classroom, leaving behind a silence so absolute it was louder than any explosion. The door clicked shut behind him. The spell was broken. All eyes swiveled to Mr. Thorne. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury and humiliation. The joke had been on him. The hierarchy had been inverted. And the evidence was right there on the board, in flawless white chalk, for everyone to see. The silence in classroom 214 lasted for a full 10 seconds after the door clicked shut. It was a vacuum, sucking all the sound and air out of the room, leaving only the stark, undeniable truth written across the blackboard. Then, chaos erupted. A dozen phones were now openly held up, videos already being texted, posted, shared. The whispers were no longer whispers but exclamations of shock. Did that just happen? He solved it. The janitor solved Thorne's impossible problem. My God, did you see his face? This last comment was directed at their teacher. Mr. Thorne stood frozen at the front of the room, his back to the class, staring at the board as if it had betrayed him. His shoulders were rigid with tension. The elegant proof was not a mathematical solution to him, it was a personal attack, a deep, humiliating scar on his ego. The laughter he had so eagerly cultivated now echoed in his memory, mocking him. He could feel the eyes of every student boring into his back, their respect for him evaporating with every passing second. He had to regain control. He had to reassert the narrative. He spun around, his face a terrifying shade of purple, his composure utterly shattered. Silence, he roared, his voice cracking with rage. The class jumped, falling quiet again. This is not a spectacle. That man, that janitor, he spat the word like a curse, has clearly been snooping through my answer keys. This is a serious breach of security and a pathetic attempt at I don't know what. It was a desperate, flailing lie, and everyone in the room knew it. The problem was original, crafted by Thorne himself that morning. There was no answer key. Sarah, the usually quiet valedictorian whom the problem had originally stumped, found a courage she didn't know she possessed. Her voice, though soft, cut through Thorne's bluster. Mr. Thorne, she said, pointing a trembling finger at the board. That substitution he used, it's not in our textbook. It's not something he could have just memorized. That's genuine insight. Thorne's eyes bulged. Being contradicted was bad enough. Being contradicted by a student, and about mathematics, was an unforgivable sin. You will not speak out of turn, Miss Davies, he thundered, slamming his hand on his desk. This is my classroom. I am the authority here. Now, everyone, take out your phones and put them away this instant, or I will confiscate them and issue detentions. But it was too late. The digital genie was out of the bottle. The videos, captioned with things like "unbelievable" and "Janitor owned my calc teacher," were already spreading through the school's social media channels like wildfire. By the time the bell rang for the next period, the story wasn't just a story, it was a seismic event. The hallway outside Thorne's classroom was packed. Students from all grades crowded around the phones of those who had been there, watching the grainy, shocking footage. The story mutated and grew with each retelling, but the core truth was undeniable. Elijah, the quiet janitor, was a secret genius, and Mr. Thorne was a cruel, humiliated fool. The principal, Dr. Evans, was a pragmatic woman who prized order above all else. She heard the commotion and emerged from her office, her expression stern. She quickly corralled a few students, demanding to know what was causing the tumult. She was shown a video. Her face, usually a mask of calm neutrality, shifted through stages of confusion, disbelief, and finally, deep, profound dread. This was a public relations nightmare of the highest order. She marched into Thorne's classroom, closing the door behind her. Their heated, muffled argument could be heard through the walls. Meanwhile, the entire school was searching for one person, Elijah. He was found where he always was during the chaotic passing periods, pushing his dust mop through the crowded hallways, head down, trying to be invisible. But invisibility was no longer an option. A wave of students parted before him, not to avoid the mop, but to stare at him. Whispers followed him. "That's him. That's the guy." He kept his eyes fixed on the floor, his expression unreadable. He wasn't a hero enjoying his victory. He was a man who had broken a sacred, unspoken rule and now feared the consequences. The weight of 1,000 stares was heavier than any trash bin he had ever lifted. The final period bell rang. The school day ended, but no one went home. An impromptu gathering formed in the main courtyard. The energy was electric, chaotic. It was then that Mr. Thorne emerged from the school, storming toward the faculty parking lot, his briefcase clutched in a white-knuckled grip. He was intercepted by a local news reporter who had somehow already gotten wind of the story. A student had likely tipped them off. A microphone was shoved in his face. "Mr. Thorne, can you comment on the incident in your calculus class today? The video of the janitor solving the complex problem is going viral." Thorne, his ego bruised and his career potentially in tatters, made his fatal mistake. Live on camera, his face contorted with anger, he pointed a shaking finger back at the school. That was no mathematician. That was a stage disruption. That man is a janitor. He's been disruptive before, and this was a malicious act. I will be pursuing his immediate termination for gross insubordination. And he never finished his sentence, because at that moment, an old, beat-up sedan pulled into the school's visitor parking lot. And out stepped a small, elderly black woman, leaning heavily on a cane. It was Elijah's mother. She had seen the video on a news alert on her phone, sent to her by a concerned neighbor. She had seen her son being mocked, and then she had seen his brilliance shine through, and then she had seen him being hunted through the halls. And she had seen enough. She walked with a slow, painful determination through the crowd, which parted for her as if moved by an unseen force. She walked right up to the sputtering Mr. Thorne and the news camera. Her voice, though aged and raspy, carried across the silent courtyard with the weight of 1,000 injustices. "You," she said, her eyes burning with a fire that age and illness could not diminish. "You think you can shame my son? You, with your little equations and your big ego? My boy was solving problems like that when he was 12 years old. He stayed here to take care of me when he should have been off at a university, becoming the man he was meant to be. He cleans your floors because he is a good man, not because it's all he can do. You should get on your knees and thank him for teaching your students the lesson you never could, that dignity isn't given by a title, and genius isn't defined by a job." The camera lights illuminated the tears now streaming freely down Mr. Thorne's face. They were not tears of remorse, but of utter, total, and public defeat. The world had seen him for what he was. And it had seen Elijah for what he was. The climax wasn't the solving of the problem. It was the shattering of a worldview, broadcast for everyone to see. In the days that followed, the earthquake at Oakcrest High settled into a new, permanent landscape. The viral video was picked up by national news outlets. The story was no longer about a janitor who could do calculus. It was a powerful parable about unseen potential, systemic barriers, and the profound cost of prejudice. Mr. Thorne was placed on immediate administrative leave. An investigation was launched, not into Elijah's insubordination, but into Thorne's long history of belittling staff and creating a hostile environment. Parental complaints that had been quietly ignored for years suddenly found a receptive audience. He resigned within the week, his reputation in tatters, a cautionary tale of how arrogance can blind you to the brilliance standing right in front of you. But the real story was Elijah, the school board, desperate to manage the PR nightmare and perhaps genuinely moved, held an emergency meeting. They didn't offer him a raise or a new uniform. They offered him a job. A real one. A full scholarship was arranged for him to finally attend the state university's mathematics program, with a guarantee of a paid position as a teacher's aide at Oakcrest upon his graduation. A path to a full teaching credential. At first, Elijah was hesitant. The spotlight was anathema to him. But it was his mother who convinced him. "You gave up your dream for me, Eli," she said, holding his hands, her own gnarled by arthritis and a lifetime of work. "Now you take it back. Not for you. For the next kid who gets looked over. For the next one they think is just a janitor, or a lunch lady, or a bus driver. You show them what we're really made of." He accepted. His first day as a student teacher's aide was unlike any other. He walked the halls not with a mop, but with a stack of textbooks. The students didn't stare at him with pity or ignore him as part of the scenery. They looked at him with respect. Awe, even. He was a living legend. He was assigned to assist in Mr. Gable's class, the now-retired teacher who had tried to help him all those years ago, brought back on a short-term contract to mentor him. The circle was complete. Elijah didn't just help students solve problems. He helped them see the beauty in them. He spoke softly, his explanations clear and patient, devoid of the condescension that had once filled that room. He became the most sought-after tutor in the school. Students who had never felt good at math found themselves understanding it for the first time under his gentle guidance. He saw them. He saw the struggling athletes, the anxious overachievers, the kids who felt invisible. He saw them all. The school itself changed. A new policy was instituted. Respect for all staff became a core part of the student and faculty handbook, backed up by mandatory training. The cafeteria workers, the security guards, the maintenance crew, they were no longer just background characters. They were called by their names. They were looked in the eye. They were thanked. The cultural shift was palpable, a healing of a deep, festering wound no one had truly acknowledged was their point. One afternoon, Elijah was tutoring a small group after school. As he explained the fundamental theorem of calculus, his hand, now often holding a dry erase marker instead of chalk, moved with the same graceful certainty it had on that fateful day. He finished, and a young freshman girl smiled, the light of understanding in her eyes. "Wow, Mr. Jones," she said. "That actually makes sense." Elijah smiled back, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. It was a smile the school had never seen before. In that moment, he wasn't the janitor who shocked the school, or the viral sensation, or even the tragic figure who lost his dream. He was a teacher. He was where he was always meant to be. The story of Elijah Jones is more than a satisfying revenge tale. It's a mirror. It forces us to ask ourselves the most uncomfortable questions. Who have we underestimated? Who have we looked past because of their job, their skin color, their accent, their quiet demeanor? What genius lies dormant in the people we treat as invisible, simply because our own prejudice and arrogance prevent us from seeing it? We move through our lives surrounded by hidden potential, by quiet battles and silent brilliance. The janitor pushing the mop, the delivery driver, the cashier at the grocery store, they are not just their jobs. They are living libraries of unwritten stories, unsung talents, and unseen depth. Elijah's story had a happy ending. But it never should have required a public humiliation to get one. His 20 years of silent contribution should have been enough. His inherent dignity should have been enough. So the next time you walk past someone the world has taught you to ignore, I challenge you to truly see them. Look them in the eye. Learn their name. Because you never know. You might just be standing in the presence of a master. And the greatest lesson you'll ever learn won't be written on any blackboard. It will be written in the simple, profound act of recognizing the undeniable brilliance in another human being. What hidden greatness are you walking past every single day?